World Rugby has announced its panel of referees for the 2023 World Cup in France later this year. Our special guest today has been included and is odds-on favourite to referee the final. That's right, joining me, Chris, Nick and Brendan is none other than the highest Test cap referee ever, Wayne Barnes. Champions Cup final to look forward to, Challenge Cup final to look forward to, and we've got the man who was in charge of Sale versus Leicester at the weekend and will be in charge of that Glasgow Toulon game. World's most capped Test referee, Wayne Barnes. Wayne, how was the AJ Bell?
Lively, very lively. It was nice to see it full. It was, I don't know if you were up there, but you had a kind of just behind the posts on the left-hand side as you ran out were all the Leicester fans. And then you had pockets of Leicester fans around the ground. And so, yeah, it had a decent old atmosphere. And as always, when you go out to Sale, some advice from the sidelines as well. You know, people encourage. I tell you what, it felt like is I did a semi-final down at Exeter when they beat Saracens in the last. Remember, they kicked to the corner. I think it was Henry Slade kicked to the corner, and they had that driving Mourner last play of the game. And the lead up to that game, you ran around the pitch, and there was those pockets, and it was really noisy. Some cracking banter before the match. It felt like that game, and I guess it had that similar size feel as well. You know, but I think it was 11 or 12,000 at the AJ Bell, so it was good. And it felt like a proper semi-final as well. You know, going at it. You know, ebb and flow. You know, a bit of niggle in it as well. What you want to see is, I think it was a great advertisement for the Premiership. So yeah, I enjoyed it, and I don't know. We stayed out of the way, stayed under the radar, and no one's from the bits. I'm sure there's always someone who's mentioning us on social media somewhere, but no mention to the match officials. After the match, so you know, we move on and we 5-day turnaround for the game on Friday.
Is that the measure of success now, Wayne? No mentions on social media. Is that?
I've always said to you is that if no one's talking about us afterwards, and I used to say, you know, whether that's the coaches, the players, or the media, then you've probably done a decent job. The one thing I've realised over the last 20 years of doing this job in the Premiership, particularly with the social media becoming more apparent, is that you're never going to please everyone. So I've got my close kind of trusted people, not just all referees. Obviously, you know, I work with Chris White quite a lot. Just done my review with Chris now. You know, Whitey will hold me to account from a refereeing point of view, but I've got ex-international coaches around me, and if you know the marker, if they think, yeah, that's a decent performance, that's what really matters to me, because you can't please everyone. You know, you as journos, you're never going to please everyone. You'll get people telling you how you should do your job. Lots of people think they can tell everyone how they can do their job now, but get the people you trust around you, trust in their opinion. When they're telling you you need to, you know, improve your grammar, and then that's who you listen to. Yeah.
File on time.
Yeah. Social media isn't someone I'm going to be able to please all the time. So, but look, if you can come out of a game and you're not the talking point, then you've probably done all right.
Are there situations you remember where you have been the talking point in a positive way? I know you're probably, you know, you've spoken extensively about the negatives of social media as a referee. Can you put a positive spin on it ever and say after the game people have, you know, warmed your heart with reflections or comments on performances?
Again, if you don't search social media and you don't search your media when you've had an off game, you shouldn't be searching it when you've had a good game. So I won't be searching the media whether you know, I'm never going to be the head. I say that Steve James, one of your colleagues, and I'll let you know a secret now. He's actually plays for my local rugby club down at Lydney. He once gave me the man of the match performance when Northampton played Gloucester, and everyone was like, "This is outstanding, you know, referee getting the man of the match." But it was just because I was meeting up with him on that weekend for a beer down at Lydney Rugby Club. So I did read that report once when he was writing for the Telegraph. Am I allowed to talk about other newspapers?
Not the Telegraph, no.
Well,
Right.
Yeah, no, you can talk about anybody.
But no, look, as again, you know, if you come off a match and the people who you trust think you've done a decent job, that's what matters. And whether it's whether that's a headline, and it's always nice to have a chat with the coaches and the players afterwards, and you'll find out pretty quickly whether or not they think you've done all right or not. It was quite funny coming off on Saturday. You know, I sin-bin Dan Cole, and I get on pretty well with Dan because I work with him with the England camp, and the only criticism he had of me is like, at least if you're going to sin-bin me less than 40 meters away so I can see your blinking card. And I thought, well, there we are. I think he's accepted that the card was all right. He just wanted me to stick it up his nose, I think.
Well, that was a classic incident, wasn't it? The Dan Cole incident, because like every prop in history, having watched it all on the big screen, so he knew precisely what was being looked at. When you got the card out, you could see him say, "What, me?" As though anyone else looks like Dan Cole on the face of the earth. So it's not mistaken identity, that's for sure. And he's just watched it the same as you. Props, eh? Props.
Those screens aren't very big in those stadiums, Stu. Maybe you just couldn't see it.
Wayne, a perennial question, but I'd be interested on your take. A frustration as a journalist is that we're not allowed to interview or talk to referees after the match for quotes about big decisions, key decisions. Now, I suspect you would have no problem with that. Very eloquent, happy to talk to people. And also, it's not a one-way thing. We need, if there's a possible, very good explanation for every decision you made, it would help us to know exactly what your thought process was there. Would you welcome a limited interviewing of referees after a match, or is that a no-no area for you?
So I think there's 2 points to that, Brendan. Is that first one is that I hope when I give a decision on the pitch, and I've got the comms, and you can stick your headphones on if you want, that you understand why I've made a decision. So let's take Dan Cole's one on the weekend. I hope I explained it that you're standing upright, Dan. So there is foul play because you could have bent lower and tackled lower. You haven't hit him really hard. So that's why I'm starting a yellow card and not red card. So you've then got that understanding from an immediate point of view why I've made that decision. There'll be decisions through this season where you would have been at, and you might disagree with that, whether or not, I think he has hit him really hard in the head or her in the head, or I think there was mitigation because the player has dropped at the last minute. And as long as you understand my decision making, you can disagree with that. But I think, if referees are on the money, you should get why they've made a decision just from their live comms. Now, I wonder whether or not the need for the post-match interview is always just to pick referees up when there's a perception that they mightn't have got it right or wrong. So if it's a general, run-of-the-mill game, I don't think anyone would be clamoring to have a chat with a ref, but I guarantee you if there's a controversial moment, there'll be a queue all the way around the AJ Bell to ask that harmless question. So I think it's a nice balance at the moment where if you really want to know about the refereeing decision, pay your whatever it is, your 10 quid for your ref link at Twickenham and have a listen. But I think there would be not the caliber of the individuals on this call, obviously, but I reckon there'll be some people who would just be lining up to talk about the controversial moments. And I don't think rugby should be about that. I think rugby should be talking about the players, should be talking about the skills, should be talking about the atmosphere, not about the one-off decision that a referee may or may not have got right or wrong.
I'd make 2 quick points on that. One is just to correct everyone, it was our request not to speak to referees any longer, because if you ended up speaking to Tony Spreadbury, you missed 9 deadlines and were threatened with the sack because you couldn't shut him up. But secondly, there have been, and we're going back to 2015 in the Frey-Joubert business and what have you, there have been quite a number of cases now, whether it's through the disciplinary process or through a World Rugby statement, let's say, identifying the fact and emphasizing the fact that the referee is considered to have got it wrong. Does that sit easily with you guys? I mean, since the introduction of technology, obviously cricket umpires have had to get used to that. I mean, that's just part of the day job now, is to find out pretty much instantly that they were wrong, and they have to self-correct with a daft hand signal. And I think they've probably grown to live with it. But does it sit comfortably with refs? Because in rugby of all games, the ref was always right.
I don't think we are always right. And if you take some of the decisions that we make on a weekend where we're like, I'm pretty certain he scored here. Oh, no, he hasn't. I don't mind correcting a decision when it's clearly wrong. I think that's what the advancement of technology is. And like, I've said this enough, I'm such a believer in technology because there's a lot of grey in rugby, you know, and there's a lot of things that happen really blinking quickly. Forward passes is the most obvious one on that, Chu. So, and they're actually jumping around a little bit. They're actually going to trial in the Under-20 World Cup down in South Africa. There's a company called Sportable, and what they do is they put a chip in a ball, and it's some NASA scientists who've invented this. And then you would have seen a little bit in the Six Nations with a company called Sage kept popping up in the corner saying distance the kick's been kicked, hang time, how far from the goal line the ball's being kicked out. And they get that technology from Sportable. And what World Rugby have invested in and trialling during the Under-20 World Cup is using Sportable for more decisions. And so, for example, forward pass technology is available now, so they can, and I'm not a physicist, I've got a job to say it, let alone be one, they can tell about relative velocity, which I think it means, is it moving quicker once it comes out the hands? So they can tell, take the pass on the weekend where Tom Foley, my TMO, comes in and says, Barnesy, I'm about to show you, this is a forward pass. Like, I think it's pretty clear that was a forward pass. But I think what people like about cricket, and what I think would be good with rugby, is when technology tells you it's a forward pass, we all trust it. When technology tells you the ball's on the line at Roland Garros or at Wimbledon, we all accept it. When the ball tells you that it's pitching in line and it's going to hit middle, we all accept it, because there's no human error. So they're trialing that in the Under-20s World Cup. So as I said, I'm jumping around here a little bit. So I don't mind correcting a decision when it's clearly wrong, because it's best for the game when we get the decisions right. I go back to 2007, my first World Cup, which is a long time ago now. There was a forward pass, as we all know, in the lead up to the France try in the quarterfinal. We should be able to rectify that now within a few seconds to say technology says there's a forward pass. So I do believe that referees are happy to correct their mistakes. Whether or not there's a press statement after a match from the governing body, whether that be EPCR this weekend, Premiership this weekend, or World Rugby in the Six Nations, has to be that governing body's own decision. Cricket, for example, make no comment on match officials. That's their choice. I think there is a discussion as a game, whether or not there's a need for it, whether we think it's that is good for the game to come out and say ref got it right, ref got it wrong. My point has always been, where do you stop? When does a match defining decision in the last play of the game become a normal run of the mill decision on the 45th minute? So that's that grey area, which I think is really tough. And what's really important for a journalist in England might not be as important for a journalist in Georgia. But there's maybe a big incident in the rugby, the Six Nations, second tier. There might be a big incident there. So should we not make a comment about that, not just about England versus Scotland? Or so I think that's a difficulty where you get with where does that stop? I don't have the right answer to that, but I think you put enough good people in a room. We're a grown-up sport. I think we should be able to have those grown-up conversations. But as long as it's done for the right reason, it is to explain why the refs got it right or TMO's got it right or wrong. That's why maybe I'm thinking about post-career. Yeah, I think having a referee analysis within a newspaper or on the TV might be the way forward, Chris.
It tends to be done, doesn't it, in the face of really significant controversy. So in 2015, you had the Scotland Wallabies business, and it was a question of law. It wasn't a marginal forward pass issue, or in your case in 2007, a not so marginal forward pass issue. But
you're backing now, Chris.
Well, yeah, I supported you all the way on that, Wayne. We all wanted to see France win. Not saying that you took the field with that; those are deep waters. But if you get so the most recent big controversy, obviously, was the Jacket Piper thing in Dublin, where I think he came out afterwards and said, "I had no choice. That was the law as he understood it." And then, of course, the controversy continues, and you get World Rugby or whoever it was, the Six Nations, reacting in a way that I personally find a little bit unfortunate. I felt pretty sorry for him because we've had a few incidents now of referees refereeing to what they consider to be the letter of the law as it stands, and then they're not fully supported in the controversial aftermath.
Yeah, and then you've got issues like that of coaches piling pressure on referees, of which the most sort of obvious incident recently was Erasmus, after the Lions tour. And I'd be very interested in your thoughts on that, Wayne, and whether World Rugby eventually managed to get it right, more or less, in that instance.
So yeah, I think there's two things I've spoken about. I think the responsibility to the game that everyone has, and particularly people in, I guess, senior positions or positions of responsibility. I think that we all have a role to play in upholding the values of the game. It's what we sell our game on quite a lot, isn't it? We do say that we're different to other sports because of the values, and we say what we love about it is the interaction between all the different stakeholders. And I don't just mean the players and the coaches and the refs. I actually mean the hacks as well. That's what makes it special. I'm even coming to your lunch again next week, so that's how special our relationship with the hacks are. But if we do that, I think we've got, if we pride ourselves on those values, I think we do have to say that when you're in those positions of responsibility, you have to behave responsibly. And openly criticizing match officials, if you're in that position of responsibility, encourages others to do it. And I saw that firsthand last year, and I can accept, as I've said a lot, I can accept criticism myself, but it's very quickly, with the world that we live in, social media at the moment, where criticism of me as an official becomes criticism as me as a person, becomes criticism of my family. And that's a step too far. And so I think what we see a lot from people in positions of of responsibility, and I don't just mean coaches or players, I mean journalists, social media writers, influencers, is that when you openly criticize an individual, not saying I think that decision's wrong, that's your job, that's what your one of your roles is to paint the picture of a game. But when you start attacking an individual, and they're kind of them as a person, it's really easy that becomes a pile, you know, and everyone else jumps on and likes that tweet, you know, or forwards that kind of social media kind of blog, and like this is a hard enough job to do as it is without everyone else telling you about, you know, what a bad person you are and what they want to do to you. And you know, we want to attract people. We want to attract people to this game because, you know, my team down in, you know, Bream, you know, their seconds and their thirds down in the Forest of Dean struggle to get a referee, and we need people to start refereeing. And so let's talk about what's great about our, you know, about officiating, and it's, you know, the camaraderie. It's about keeping your boots on. It's about still running around when your body's falling apart a little bit, and, you know, sharing a pint afterwards with the captains and the coaches. But, you know, if people see some of the abuse that's happened to some of my colleagues over the last couple of weeks, people will be saying, really? Is that what I want to give up my time for? So we've all got a role to play in upholding values. And I get people want to make a living for being quite, I don't know, controversial, but doesn't help our game.
I agree completely with that. Absolutely.
One of the other things I wanted to ask you, Wayne, is how much has being a barrister helped you as a rugby referee and vice versa? How much is transferable from one to the other?
It's probably helped me from a financial point of view, if I'm honest, Nick. but there's a lot of crossover, I think. There's two I always I try and give a kind of insight into, and I started off as a criminal barrister going around the magistrates' courts of London. And I don't know if you've ever been to a magistrate's court just as an observer. Obviously, I'm not looking at any of you on this call thinking you might have spent some time down there. But like, if you think about it as a young junior barrister, you go along to the magistrates' courts of Camberwell or Highbury Corner in London, and the first time you meet your client is down in the cells, you know, you get presented with what they've been charged with. You go down there, you meet them. You've got to try and understand where they're coming from, get all the information that you need, and you've got to kind of build a bit of trust in a real short period of time. And they've got to know that you're across the, you know, your job, your profession really quickly. And then, you know, you can't be too long-winded about it. You've got to be able to, you know, explain the laws of self-defense, you know, in a few minutes. And then, you know, off you go to represent them. And that's it. That's the first time you met them. You think about the first time you go and meet an international rugby captain 20 years ago. The first time I would have met someone like McCall or Gregan would have been in the changing room before the match, an hour and a half before kickoff. And again, you've got to be able to build trust, answer some questions, be succinct, and then you've got to go up and perform, and hopefully they trust you for those 80 minutes. So there's a lot about those relationship buildings. It's definitely the one thing that I think's helped my career throughout, is that ability to build relationships in a short period of time. I'm not saying that everyone's got to like you, but you've got to be able to have a working relationship really quickly. And they build over time, and obviously you get a few repeat clients as a barrister. But you know, you might get some teams you work with more and more, and the more you work with people, the more they tend to kind of be able to you know, trust you. So there's that element of it, building trust, being succinct with advice, being able then to take what you've been told and follow it through. And then there's that element of trying to explain quite complex things. You know, I would always describe myself as quite a jury advocate, where I'm able to take my client's case and explain it to the jury in quite a succinct manner. And that's what I try and do as a ref as well. There's some really complex laws out there. That's part of it. That's what I like about my job, is that there are some complex laws. It is the most complex game. Ed Morrison has always said that, as one of the people who, I've always admired and who's helped me progress, is the game is one of the most complex laws there is. And as a referee, you've got to be able to kind of understand those and kind of interpret those. And I've got to do that when I've got a camera at my nose and you've got 80,000 people screaming and shouting at me, and I've got to be able to, because I don't have 10 minutes to review it and go back and replay it and just get my wording right. I've got to do that within 20, 30 seconds, and I've got to get it right, or back to that point that we've just discussed, everyone wants to tell me that I've got my job wrong again. So there is that element of, being able to put into words some complex kind of arguments and under quite an intense, scrutiny, whether that's from a jury or whether that's from 80,000 at Twickenham.
You're actually uniquely in the role of being judge and jury when you're on the pitch, most, aren't you?
And executioner.
And execution.
Well, as you can imagine, it's two pretty popular jobs, isn't it? Being a ref and a lawyer. In my spare time, I suppose I should be a parking warden or something like
that. Yeah. And be an estate agent. Yeah, that'd be good. Or a politician. Wayne.
Wayne, just before we leave that bit, you're talking about the trust. Something that you and a few others, Luke Pierce is another, have done in the last 10 years or so, is to learn a bit of French, so you can have that slightly elevated contact with the very large number of French players that we see on the scene. Now, just tell us, maybe by way of encouragement for a young ref coming up, how long did that take you to learn enough French to have a conversation, or at least to be able to communicate with a French captain or a French hooker, French scrum half? And how important is it that you try and build that into your skill set as a referee going forward?
Well, first of all, there's an assumption that I am able to have that conversation with a French hooker or French scrum half. I've been told by many a French hooker and scrum half, please talk to me in English. Once when I thought I was telling the scrum half to put the ball into the scrum, which is a melee, but I pronounce it with my West Country twang, melee, which I'm told is a washing machine brand. I did have a look from the scrum half while I was telling him to get the ball into the washing machine. So there is that assumption that I do speak French, but I think we've all did it with the tricolor books, didn't we, back in our GCSE day? No, I'm looking at the people online. You lot didn't do GCSEs, did you? So O levels. Sorry.
O levels, definitely.
O levels,
yeah. So my GCSEs, I did a bit of French. I've got my GCSE. I think I got an A. I must have been all right at it then, or. I pulled the ball over someone's eyes, and I always enjoyed speaking a bit of French. And then you spend a lot of time going around my first game in France, I think, was in the Pro de Deux. I did an under 19 World Cup in 2003. We were hosted in we stayed in Marcousset, where the French team are based. They called it Marcatraz. And that probably was a good description for it. So I've always spent a lot of time in France with games. And I just think it's that idea of, I want to understand what they're saying. I want to be able to go to a restaurant or to, be able to order a beer in a bar and be able to, get by. And I still get my lesson each week, every Friday afternoon. Actually, I had a message from Stephen. So Stephen Burns, my French teacher. He's a lawyer in France. He lives in France. He's married a French woman, lives in Paris, and I met him a couple of years ago, and I just wanted to continue to improve it. So I speak with him every Friday. We have an hour on the call. He sends me some clips. He's a referee himself as well. In the second and third division, so we kind of share some philosophies about the game, but it helps because you can not all of the French teams speak fluent English, so you can get across convey some messages, and whether it's to a prop to say I need you a bit higher, or whether it's to to the captain to say that I think that is foul play because the player is too upright. I think it helps. I think it helps build that trust. So I'll continue to do that. Look, and the World Cup's in France. It's going to be a lot more enjoyable experience knowing what I'm ordering from a menu, rather than having a bit of a surprise turn up on your plate, which happened quite a few times in Japan in 2019, when as soon as they didn't have those little pictures or those little bowls that were outside some of the Japanese restaurants where you could just point at, some of the things that's turned up on my plate, I'm like, oh, well, I guess I must have ordered it. So hopefully I'll have a better chance.
Well, I have to tell you at this point, Wayne, you were brought up in the rugby scene of the Forest of Dean. When I was playing, we had something in common with French players, because if we had a Forest of Dean referee, we had to ask him if he could speak in English, please.
It's so true as well. I still go back, and my family is still there, as I think you know. I come back whirring and burring a lot worse after a couple of days there, and I have to slow down my parents and my grandparents just to make sure I catch what they're actually saying. Remember, you ever take your friends back down there from university? They would just smile and nod. It's like me on a rugby pitch at times when the French talk back to me. You just smile and nod and hope you're not laughing about something that's really serious.
I'm glad you're doing well with French restaurants. Anyway, there was a well-known journalist of who these guys will know, Tim Glover. You may have come across Tim down the years. I once accompanied him to quite a posh restaurant in Paris called the Brasserie Lip, very famous, a bit of an Ernest Hemingway type locale. And he was so brilliant in French, he ordered a 3-course meal, all of which was soup.
I'm just aware of time. I wanted to talk about the France 2023 selection. We kind of alluded to it already. It was 6 days ago. Obviously, Wayne, congratulations. That's your 5th World Cup now, which is sort of the latest milestone in what's been a pretty incredible career. Does that sound weird to say you've refereed at 5 Rugby World Cups, or will have refereed at 5 Rugby World Cups?
Because 07 doesn't seem that long ago either. And as I said, I just finished off a kind of a review of my game with Chris White. Chris was there as an English referee at that point with Tony Spreadbury, as you remember as well, Chris, and I was there as very much the young guy there, 28. But I remember that tournament really vividly. I remember all the people who were there. I remember the fun nights out in Paris. I remember the trips down to Bordeaux and Marseille. I just think it shows that time's kind of gone pretty quickly. But each World Cup, I think it'll be the same for whether you're a player, a coach, a ref, a journo. There's a special group of people who go to each World Cup, and you have special memories with those groups of people. So 07 as a young guy, there was myself, Nigel Owens, and Craig Joubert's first World Cup, and we were all pretty close. We'd come through the sevens ranks together, and we've got some wonderful memories of that tournament. And it's quite nice that if I went to another World Cup, that would make me 48, so that you can guess the likelihood of that. But it seems there's something kind of circular around starting in 07 and 03 being my 23 being like the end one. And I think it'll be amazing over there. Like some of the games that I've had in France over the last 12 months or so, the final down in Marseille last year, the France-New Zealand game down in Marseille, there are some really great atmosphere club games taking place, but some of the Six Nations matches, like the England the England-France game, the end of 2002 Six Nations, like the noise and the atmosphere and the build-up to that match. I think they'll host it wonderfully. They hosted it wonderfully in 2007, but it's such a rugby country, isn't it? And we're going to get to go to some amazing venues across the country. And that's what's nice about the European Cup. You get to go to Toulouse, you get to go to Clermont, but now in the World Cup, you get to go to Nantes, you get to go to, I think there's some up in Lille, isn't there, in that way. So you'll see some different bits of France. And the one bit that the French do really well is like making you feel welcome and, you know, and hosting you real well. So I'm really excited about it, really excited that there's, you know, I'm going with some friends and colleagues from the RFU as well. It's the first time in my career in those World Cups that we've had 4 referees going. And we've also got Tom Foley as a TMO and Christoph Ridley as an AR. So 6 of us, 6 of your mates, 6 of the people who you work with every week, you train with every week, you travel around the globe with. So 4 of us are off to the Bledisloe Cup at the MCG in the lead up. And, you know, how good does that sound, you know, refereeing a match at the MCG, 100,000 people against, you know, Australia against the All Blacks. That's not many people will say that, but I'm doing that with 3 really good mates, you know, in Christoph, Carl, and Tom. And you know, like players, like coaches, it's, you know, those memories when you eventually put down your whistle and you draw stumps that you'll be going, that was a pretty special trip. And I think that's what 23 will be in Paris. And like Paris has, you know, got a lot of meaning for me, 07, but I also, when I got married, we got married in London, Polly and I, in Lincoln's Inn, where I'm a barrister. But then we've got a mate who owns a restaurant just outside of Paris. So we chucked everyone on the Eurostar and we went over and had what I think in French is called Le Boom, which means the party, on a little island just outside of Paris. So I'd imagine there'll be a trip or 2 to the little island in Paris, because no journalists can get there, because you've got to get a boat there, and we'll be blowing up the boat when we get one side of the river.
Well, on that note, I'm going. I hope you order yourself some food. I've got to go, so I've got a doctor's appointment, so you can cut that bit out if you want. But it's nice to see you, Wayne.
You too, mate.
Best of luck, Wayne. I'll see you soon. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, Chris.
Yeah, Chris.
Could I ask you 2 very quick questions before you need to go? One is, could you give a World Cup winner for 2023, 6 months out, or however long it is, 5 months out?
Can I give a World Cup winner for 2023?
Yeah.
Can you imagine a lawyer who specialises in bribery and corruption giving you a prediction for the Rugby World Cup? I think I'll leave that to the experts on the call.
Can you give a hemisphere?
Good sidestep, that one, Wayne.
Yeah, that was a good sidestep.
Can I give you a hemisphere? I can tell you that it will come from one of the hemispheres, yes. Yes, most definitely.
No further questions in that department then. And the other thing is, so we obviously won't have time for the Random Rugby 15. I just want to ask, one of the questions is rugby law you would change. And I'd love to know what Wayne Barnes' one rugby law that he would change is.
Oh, I don't want to change a rugby law. I just want to make sure we're really clear on what the philosophy is. Is it about getting every single decision possible correct? Or is it about trying to get the really important decisions? And once we get that, I think that will direct the way that the game is played, referee, and fed back. So I think if we get that right, we'll have a real, we'll have a real decent crack of getting the game moving forward.
That's a good answer. That's very different to the answer we had. We had Craig Maxwell Keys on, and I can't remember what he said now, but he had a very clear law where he was just like, this is bollocks and I want to get rid of it. Very different.
I think it was the forward pass, wasn't it?
So,
wasn't it? Everybody knows what a forward pass is, just ref what we think. I think it was along those lines.
Yeah, he was quite dismissive of it. Cool. Yeah. Right, Wayne, I know you need to get going.
No, pleasure. Well, thanks for your time, everyone. I hope to see some of you next week.
Thanks a lot. Thanks very much.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, Amber, as well. Bye. Should we do a little Champions Cup final prediction? Obviously, Chewy's gone. I'm trying to remember who predicted what last week. And
well, we all went Sale. Well, most of us went Sale win, and actually, me and you, I think, went. No, me and one other went shock Northampton win.
Yeah, I didn't predict Northampton. I know that.
No, I did.
I predicted Northampton, and it was. Did you predict Northampton as well, Brent?
Yeah.
We got it significantly wrong.
Yeah,
we did, but we got Sale significantly right.
Yeah. Although we were saying that Sale would be the less close of the same. The less.
No, we said. I don't know what we said. I think we said Sale left to be tight, but
yeah.
It was. I thought it was quite an interesting weekend. I mean, Northampton needed a quick start, and that's the exact opposite to what they got. I mean, that was always the caveat. If Saracens got a start against them, nothing was going to happen. But
well, they're the best. Sarries are the best front runners in the league, right? You know,
they are. And if they show the sort of the thing about them is that their defence stepped up a gear, and they looked like their old selves in defence in that game. They shut Northampton down, and they're just they're very clinical when it comes to putting away their chances, and that's the difference I think between them and Sale. Sale are the advances that they've made are terrific. I thought that they gave Leicester a dusting at the scrum, and Steve Borthwick, on appointing Tom Harrison as the new scrum coach, said that Leicester's scrum is feared or throughout Europe, or renowned throughout Europe. And I thought, yeah, maybe 20 years ago, but this Leicester scrum is no great shakes, and Sale actually showed that.
Simon McIntyre is a bit of a revelation. I remember him as a bit of not a journeyman at Wasps, but he wasn't even their first choice all the time. He's suddenly become a really major player, Simon McIntyre.
I think he's always been a very good prop. He's switched heads, so he's gone to loose head, and I think that he's very, very effective there. But very good build for a prop, and clearly very very effective indeed. And when Oosthuizen came on, I don't know how many caps he'd have for South Africa, but I reckon he'd be pushing well into the 40s probably. And when he came on, they sent the Tigers back at a couple of scrums at a rate of knots. So it'd be very, it'd be a very interesting final. But just Saracens, I'd sort of underestimated them. I thought that they'd shown not the same sort of intensity and not the same sort of coherence, but in that game they were very, very clinical. They'll be very difficult to beat.
It was good to see how good both George Ford and Owen Farrell were as well, I think.
Oh yeah,
the Ford Farrell axis is now coming back into the debate for World Cup time potentially, and I don't feel as bad about it potentially being a thing as I do about the Smith and Farrell, which has obviously now been put to bed.
Yeah.
Let's look at the Champions Cup and Challenge Cup very, very briefly. Leinster La Rochelle. Brendan, I'll come to you. Just sell it a little bit first of all. It's obviously a repeat of last year. Sell it.
Well, in one way, it doesn't need selling. The stakes are so much higher even than last year because there's revenge from the semi-final is required. It might not be the prettiest match. La Rochelle, when they're at their awesome best, isn't always pretty rugby, but it is going to be a monstrous sort of game. I hope. I watched the best game I've watched all season on Saturday evening. I watched the URC semi between Munster and Leinster, and it was gloves off mayhem for 80 minutes. One try, I think, was it one or two tries in the match? It wasn't a try fest whatsoever. It was magnificent. And I'm hoping these two great sides go at it with that intensity. I'm a little bit concerned for Leinster, whose praises we've all been singing, not least me. The bubble was burst a little bit last week. They put out a weakened team, and they came up short. And they came up short at this time of the year last season as well. I just wonder if there might be a few little demons mentally creeping in there. La Rochelle are not a team you want to play if you've got any sort of mental hang-ups. So I'm still going to go with Leinster, but it's going to be hellish close.
Yeah.
Nick, who are you going with?
I think I'm going to go with La Rochelle. They outscored Leinster 3-0 last year. All Leinster's points came from Johnny Sexton's boot or Ross Byrne 1 penalty. They had 7 penalties in all. And they did it without having Kerbalo available. So I think that they're a side that are just capable of causing anybody serious trouble because of the sheer physicality that they bring to it. But also, I think that they're underestimated in terms of what they do, outside as well. So I'll go with them. It's not in Marseille, but Dublin, which is home advantage plus for Leinster. So I think that will have a significant bearing. And if Leinster do bring their A game, their finishing has been, I just think, remarkable. They're a team that don't let it. They're a little bit like the All Blacks were. If you make a mistake, they punish you. So I think that it's a very, very finely balanced game. But I think that La Rochelle have got the physical clout to be able to put Leinster under more pressure than anybody else has managed to in the European Cup this season.
I think I've read as well that La Rochelle's breakdown muscle, i.e. Lavani Bottia, Jonathan Donty, they're both back, aren't they?
Yeah, they're back. Aldrit as well. But you counter that with Doris and Van der Fleer and Conan. They're all terrific back row forwards, and they completely outplayed whoever it was, in the semi. Totally.
I'm the deciding vote, aren't I? I'm going Leinster for home advantage. So, well, we will see. I can't remember what Chris said last week. I'm sure he did give us a prediction. Brent, what do either of you remember?
I don't know. In his column, he said that the other day, I do read his column. He said that he'd have 9 of the Leinster team in the URC team of the season, or was it the European team of the season? So yeah, I think we probably know where Chris's allegiance lays there.
I have a feeling he'd be going Leinster as well. Well, let's talk about the Barnsley's match then. Toulon, Glasgow. First mention is this the last time we'll see Sergio Parise on a rugby field?
Well, it'll be the last. Could be the last final. I mean, it seems he isn't in the Italy long squad for the World Cup. I don't necessarily think that's curtains yet, because he's got Toulon are desperately scrapping to get in the playoffs in the T14, and it might be that they've had a conversation. We don't want to see you until July, Sergio, but it might be that they've had another conversation and it's not going to happen. I don't think Toulon are going to trouble the scorers in the T14, so I think this would be his last chance to win a medal, lift a cup. And back on New Year's Day, in my New Year's Day column, I tipped Toulon to win this tournament. I think I could see early on they targeted it. Parisi has targeted it. He's got a great record in this tournament. I mean, he's been, God knows how many finals he's played, but he seems to have been playing Challenge Cup finals for nearly 20 years. So I think it's going to be a Toulon Sergio Parisi occasion. And that's not to diminish Glasgow, who've been a breath of fresh air and a superb attacking unit when they really get it together. But when Toulon put their first team out, and when they're on the case, they're still a pretty good side.
Yeah, they're inconsistent, and Glasgow, who used to have the same tag, have become more consistent. And they're essentially, the thing about it is that one of them is a club side, albeit with a few Galacticos, and in Parise a very veteran one, but Glasgow are pretty well 2/3 or half the Scotland side, so they're very cohesive. They're very, very together in terms of what they do. I think again, I think it should be a humdinger. I think it should be a really good final. I think they're probably very well matched. I think that Glasgow might edge it.
And what an occasion that would be for Scottish rugby. very little European and anything to shout about in Europe for 25 years. But that would be terrific if they won that on the back of a promising, if underfulfilled, Six Nations season. So, you know, again, you talk about Irish rugby started building a few years ago. This could be the start of something for Scotland.
But despite that, Brendan, the way you were speaking just now, you suggested that.
It's too long for me. I just feel name on the cup with that one. Parisi needs a send-off story, and this is probably it.
Yeah. So I'm going too long as well, which means, Nick, you're out on your own with both of your predictions.
Could be not for the first time.
That won't be the
first time. It could be another glorious redemption story after last week's Northampton prediction.
Hang on. Got Sale right anyway.
Yeah. So we will see. I think we'll wrap up there, guys. I look forward to seeing you both next week. Thanks for listening to this week's edition of the Rugby Paper podcast, and don't forget to subscribe on whichever podcast platform you use and recommend the show to your friends. The Rugby Paper is available to buy every Sunday, and to make sure you don't miss it, subscribe through our print, digital and online options at therugbypaper.co.uk/subscriptions. That's therugbypaper.co.uk/subscriptions to get all our content for as little as 14p per day.